Geeta, thank you for joining us on the Housing Collective podcast. It's lovely to see you. For the listeners, could you give us a brief introduction to yourself and your organisation?
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and good to be here. I'm Geeta Nanda, and I'm the Chief Executive of Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing. We're a large housing association. We've got around 60,000 homes. We operate in London, the area outside London. I call it sort of the commuter zone, it feels like nowadays, which is, Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Surrey, all that sort of area around there. We go up into Cambridge and then into the East Midlands into Nottingham and Derby. We have a large amount of housing which is just social rented, so we have a large amount of shared ownership. We do we do market sale, but in joint venture. We have key worker accommodation as well, where that's a sort of intermediate market rent. So we have a whole range of different tenures that we operate, and I would say one of our key specialisms is regeneration as well. We're a big an organisation that does a lot of regeneration schemes, and we're very proud of that as well. We've got a really rich history. We were set up as a consequence, really. We call it the Windrush generation, who came to this country who had really poor quality housing conditions. And our founder who set us up was really about improving the conditions for people in those sort of inner city areas who had such poor quality housing. So, we've got a very rich history, a great organisation, and I've been chief exec sort of for about 16 years now, from Thames Valley to Metropolitan Thames Valley, a journey across those organisations coming together.
That is brilliant. Thank you, Geeta. And what a wonderful story as well. And talk to us a bit more about your journey to becoming Chief Executive of MTVH.
Well, I'm a sort of housing person through and through. One of those people that, fell into housing. I sort of started off, as many people did, as a sort of graduate trainee in a local authority. And mine was like a management traineeship. So you went to 3 different directorates. And I started off in housing, went into finance. I was meant to go into education, and I sort of really fell for housing, really enjoyed it. Did research in housing, and then ended up working for a housing association. As soon as I landed in the housing association, I just felt the culture fit for me personally. I really enjoyed it. And, then I've sort of been in housing associations ever since. I've had a journey through a number of them and, done different jobs. And before I went to Thames Valley as chief executive, I was the group operations director at Notting Hill. It was Notting Hill Housing Trust, now Hill Genesis, where I was responsible for all the operations really within the organisation. So, I've had a good old journey in housing.
You mentioned that you obviously joined. Obviously, if you look at MTVH, you joined Thames Valley back in 2008, and I think we can both agree 2008 could probably be described as a bit of a challenging economic climate, to say the least. I mean, how was your first initial years in post as a first-time chief exec, and particularly in that such difficult economic climate?
It's interesting, Tom, because I've, like most people, walk into a job, they have a kind of idea, like, this is what I'm going to do. So I walked into that job thinking, first-time chief exec, I had a kind of plan of the things I would like to do, and walked in, and because it literally happened overnight, didn't it? It was a financial crash, and it just sort of happened. And we'd signed up to a massive shared ownership program, sales program, biggest the organisation had ever had in its history. The financial crash had a massive impact. And I remember my chair saying to me, as I walked through the door, and things were beginning to happen. And I said, what are my priorities? And he said, just make sure we don't go bust. So it was really quite a frantic time of, obviously looking at development. We had to stop all development. More than that, because the market crash, the housing market crash, we had sales shadows. So we had to think really creatively. We introduced our own mortgage. For people, we had a big shared ownership program. Luckily, in fact, it was with Berkeley Homes, so the quality was really good. So we carried on selling through that sort of period, and shared ownership, even in difficult times, does sell. But we did have to make, quick cuts. We also started working with a range of other housing organisations to help them, because we did have that depth of knowledge. So, we were doing development services for people like Richmond Housing Partnership, Bracknell Forest Homes, so a whole range of different organisations. But it was a really difficult time where you basically had to sit around a table and make very fast decisions to make sure that you did go bust. But, to make sure that you kind of really responded and reacted very quickly to the market. So it was all my lovely plans out the window. And it was all just about, making sure we were doing the right thing at that time to keep going through that market.
I can imagine. And just out of interest, Geeta, a lot of people that I speak to at the moment say it's probably the toughest time in their career in housing, right, in 2023, 2024. I mean, do you see any similarities from 2008 to today?
I mean, I think it's a different tough. Then you had a financial crash, so accessing the market, accessing funds was difficult, and the property market declined very quickly. But your core income was solid, and the difference now is that there is so many competing pressures in terms of your income, and costs are increasing exponentially. So it's a very different kind of crisis. I don't think it's anything like the same as before. There's still a difficulty. You still have to react, to respond. But it's much more around how do you actually meet your obligation as an organisation to your customers, given the increasing costs and limited income. And the fact that we've had a model which is where we borrow against our assets to build new homes, and those costs of borrowing have gone up, hugely. And that whole model of actually, borrowing, that sort of debt model of borrowing against your assets at a time when you need to spend a large amount of money on your existing stock, is a model under stress. So I think it's a very different kind of problem. And last time we had to react very quickly to a market change, and that happened. But this time we have to react. It's not just around the sales market or the accessing finances. You can still access finance, you can still sell home. It's much more around your business model and how you can actually deliver with many increasing customer demands, but limited ability to, increase your income to respond to it.
And on that, Geeta, you talk about, like I say, unlike a commercial organisation, you are in essence capped with your income, as you say there, but you're also having to deal with multiple competing pressures, agendas by government, but also obviously that increased customer demand. How do you balance all those at a boardroom table? And do you have any advice for chief executives that are still having those conversations?
I mean, I think everyone I speak to is having those conversations. And it's not easy. So it's about, and every organisation is different. There are different challenges in London to up north, or the Midlands, or, southwest of England. There are different, housing need problems. There are different problems that organisations have. Different size organisations will have different problems as well. Obviously, we've got all the building safety, cladding expenses. If you're a kind of large organisation in London, that's very different if you're a rural organisation. So, I do think it's really about sitting around the table with the board, not us at there. It's a team where you're sitting together to really outline what are your particular challenges as an organisation. Where are your priorities? What can you stop doing? What do you want to continue doing? Why? And making sure everybody is on board with that messaging, because there are tough times ahead, and they're at the moment. And you can see that. You can see local authorities going bust at the moment, can't you? You can see, housing associations merging, maybe because they got into financial trouble, maybe because they don't have the skills and resources within the teams to deal with some of this complexity. So, you can see that's a sign of organisations clearly under stress. So it is really around what your priorities are, and also how you manage the expectations of your customers as well, and the transparent and honest conversations you have to have with your customers about what you can and can't do as an organisation. And that's not easy either when expectations have been raised so much.
Really interesting. Thank you, Geeta. And I think also just from a UK standpoint, I think, yes, there are different variations across the UK, but I think we both can agree that it's no secret there is a chronic shortage of affordable homes across the whole of the UK. But due to budget restraints, as you say, a lot of housing associations are drawing back on their development programmes. MTVH, however, in 2023, formed a new joint venture with Legal & General to provide 2,500 homes over the next 7 years. But interestingly, 2,000 of those homes are going to be for shared ownership. So can you talk to us a bit about that deal with L&G and how that's all come about, and also why you decided to go down that route?
So we, as many associations are looking at the for-profit RP world, and what are they up to? And we felt that actually there are a large number out there, but there are some that are, they are ethical, they are British institutions. They've got kind of household names that are trusted within, the UK. And we wanted to work, and we are working with a number of for-profits actually, where we're providing services for them. But we felt with Legal & General, it was, we felt alignment in terms of organisations of what we wanted to do. But they're very clear, as are most for-profits, that the space they want to operate in is shared ownership. Because, as we know, social rent, lots of subsidy, as it come from, whereas shared ownership is a more interesting space, I think, for a lot of the for-profit RPs. And we have an expertise in shared ownership. We're one of the original shared ownership providers and have a good knowledge, understanding and, ability to kind of work on shared ownership in that space. So that's how our JV came about, both trusted organisation and it's as and when the market can provide, in terms of finances. It's we haven't set up a for-profit within our organisation. We felt it would be good to work as a joint venture. Joint ventures have worked previously with developers and contractors. So, we felt like this was a good way to work with a for-profit, and they can take a greater share, they can do more, or we can. There's flexibility within that partnership as well. But they're very clear that there will be some rent within that as well, because there won't be homogenous sort of areas of shared ownership. So it came about really for there's different money, different investment coming into the space. How can we work with it, but also keep our own expertise, and our own shared ownership under our own name as well, under our So Resi brand.
Geeta, you've mentioned earlier that shared ownership has always been kind of high up on the agenda with MTVH and will continue to be so. But I'm keen to get your views, really, because shared ownership can be seen as a double-edged sword at times, in that it gives people the opportunity to own their first home who may not have been able to do so otherwise, whilst others view it as a driver for financial instability due to rising rents, inflation, service charges, just to name a few. I mean, what are your thoughts on that aspect?
I mean, at the moment, shared ownership is one of the only ways that people can get into home ownership, particularly, whilst there's an adjustment in the market in terms of interest rates. But it's about being honest and transparent about what the product is and what will happen to people's finances over time. Many of the arguments against it are around leasehold, and there's a whole area of leasehold reform going on. At MTVH, we got rid of ground rents, before government was talking about getting rid of ground rents, where we are the freeholder and we've got the ability to do that. We've already made adjustments to the products ahead of leaseholder reform. But, anybody who lives in an apartment is going to have service charges. Those service charges are going up because insurance is going up, costs are going up, energy costs are going up. So Anybody who lives in a flat or in a block is going to have increases in service charges. So we talked about ground rents. In terms of the unsold equity and the rent, the charge for the unsold equity. I mean, when interest rates are at the level they are at 5%, actually looks like a great deal, doesn't it? If you've got 2.75 or 1.752% that you're paying as a charge on your unsold equity, is much cheaper than your mortgage. When mortgages were up 1.5%, 2%, people were saying, well, I'm paying much more on this than I am on my mortgage. So actually, when you've got a period of normality where probably 4.5% interest rates, then actually you've still got a good deal when it comes to shared ownership, because it's just subsidised, it's lower than you would be paying on a mortgage, which is why it is affordable. So I think it's actually, as this adjustment has happened, it's actually easier for people to understand that. And then it's about being clear. There is an increase in this over time, and people be clear about what their expectations are about what they will do. Are they going to move? Are they going to want to stay in the property long term? Will they buy additional equity? Actually, do they not want to buy it because it's cheaper? As I said, they'd have to pay more on a mortgage rate to staircase up. Maybe it's cheaper for them to not do that right now. So it does give flexibility. It gives people the ability to get on that housing ladder where they can't in the expensive areas any other way. So it gives choice. So I'm a fan, but I think we do have to be realistic about and honest about, what are those costs and help people understand, okay, over the next 5 years, what's that going to mean for you? Which is why those affordability checks are so important.
Yeah, fascinating. And I think, like you say, that honesty and transparency is key, really, isn't it? So everything is out on the table that in 5 years, this could get to X. And that's so important. I mean, do you think, just given that aspect of where the market is now and clearly interest rates, kind of, we don't know what will happen with interest rates over the coming years, but do you think that government could push this tenure more broadly to create that secondary market to help people move into home ownership?
Well, I mean, it's a supported product under the Affordable Homes Programme, but I suppose what's interesting is the number of for-profits and investors coming into this space, because they see it as something which is, the index-linked rent is attractive for investors, and it's a long-term product. So I think, there is stuff government can do, and it is, in planning terms, an affordable product. But there are also, I think, an increasing number of investors coming into the space that are looking to put more into it. And it won't grow just by housing associations alone, because there's a limit to what housing associations will do because of sales risk or because of where the geography of where they operate and where it operates. So the only, unless government really wanted to come in and put all its money into expanding shared ownership, which they won't do and shouldn't do, because we need rent more than anything. More than anything, we need good rented homes. So, I think it will be something which will grow, but it will grow more quickly as investors come into the space.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. And you mentioned earlier as well, Geeta, around the whole aspect which you and MTVH are really passionate about, is the whole aspect of placemaking and regeneration. For housing associations, there is, for obvious reasons, there's a lot of discussion around the quality of existing homes and the placemaking agenda. So given your geographical footprints, that there's naturally going to be very differing challenges from that there are in London as there are in Derby, for instance. So what are your thoughts on the whole placemaking agenda, and what are your plans over the coming years around the quality of existing homes?
Yeah, I mean, I think regeneration is one of the ways you can tick all the boxes, hit all the buttons, because you can invest in existing homes that you're not going to knock down. You can give people new homes in a local area, because they are very much, part of the process of what are you going to do in that locality. You can hit the decarbonisation, improvement of quality of homes and the surrounding areas, because some of the estates or places we operate in, are poor quality, that surrounding area. So you can improve that and have more biodiversity, better parklands, cycling, all those sorts of things. And so we're a great fan, and we want to do more of it, want to take more of our existing estates and look at how we can do regeneration. Now, some of those are going to be very, very long term because they're big, and others will be much quicker because they're small. And I think one of the criticisms of regeneration is it takes a long time. There's a lot of disruption, but they don't all have to be like that. There are, we're doing some smaller estates, which within 5 years, we are knocking down, rebuilding, moving people, improving. And that's not, when you think of a new build, it takes 3 years to do a new build.
Of course.
It's not, it's not that long. So I think, it's really important that we think about not just programs of, new homes or decarbonisation or investment in stock. It's got to be brought together and really think about what does this community locality need and how can we achieve that. And so that's where I'm a really big fan of regeneration, because you can look at the 10 years, you can look at the housing need of your existing residents, and you can look at the stock and the investment in the stock that's required. And, and it can be really win-win for everybody as a result of it. It is going to be different. I mean, if it's an estate regeneration, that doesn't differ massively between localities, whether you're in the Midlands or London, because, you want the same aim. The finances may differ in terms of what investments needed in order to make it work. But there are, within some of the areas in Nottingham, Derby we work, there are lots of streets where there's a lot of private rental, which brings down the the quality of the homes in that street because you have a churn of people. So I think some of the solutions are also different. Can we, as a housing association, buy up more of the private rental stock in that area and make a difference in terms of those streets or localities? And so all of this needs money, all of it needs investment, but I think they're really important problems to solve.
It's really interesting. I was, and I think you mentioned the point around, I was going to talk about this actually, Geeta, around the worry for regen is that whole issue around decanting residents and the disruption that it can cause to families. But the point that you made is exactly that. It could actually be similar to the argument around new build as well. But talk to me a bit more. I was really interested to know more around your resident ballot approved regeneration scheme over in Barnet, and what advice would you have for leaders who are looking to do something very similar?
I think it's all about listening to the local community, because often they think they're going to be left till last. And actually, if you can show within the projects up front that there's going to be early wins for people within that community, and they're going to get homes they want, then, most people can see, they can look at their surroundings and see that these properties are end of life. And also, they're, tenants are very reasonable, unlike sometimes local communities that block planning permission for new homes. Most of the people that live on our estates can see the need for more housing. They can see the overcrowding within their estates. They can see the fact that local people can't get new homes. They know what's going on. So they're much more in favour of development if it's the right development. And, they care about what rents, they care about the affordability, they care about the external space, they care about themselves, of course, like what are they going to get? And you have to be able to answer all those questions. But if we're not we're not giving something back to those local communities for all the disruption they're going to go through, which it will be, then we're not doing it correctly. So I think it is really listening and, making sure we build those into the plans and we change things as a result of the consultation as well.
It's interesting, and making sure, like you say there, the customer voice is embedded in all of those plans as well. And I'm keen as well, Geeta, just to touch on your leadership style as well, if you don't mind, and clearly, particularly given how big the organisation is, particularly around dispersed teams. So as an organisation of over 60,000 homes spreading across, as you say there, London right up to the East Midlands, naturally you can't touch everyone or be involved in every decision that's made on a daily basis. So how do you make sure that your values are really embedded into daily activities?
Well, I think it's about being clear around what your values are as an organisation. So when we went through the merger to create Metropolitan about Thames Valley, we had a very good process by which we engage the organisation about, and our residents as well, about what the values should be for the organisation, and really clear about what does it mean. It's not just a word or a phrase, but what does that mean in terms of day-to-day activities about what's going on in the organisation. So, and get people involved in that. So, get them involved in creating those values and defining what that means in real terms in day work. And I think the other thing is, but can you imagine if I was involved in every discipline? That's quite horrendous thought. No, goodness me, no. But it's about having good leaders throughout the organisation. You're just one person, but actually the organisation is made up of, incredible leaders at all levels. And that's the other thing is, it's showing people that they are leaders at all levels of the organisation. If they're frontline members of staff dealing with residents on a day-to-day basis, it's about making the appropriate decisions that they can make as well. And how do you allow people on the front line to make decisions so that, because that's how you have fast, that's how you become an agile organisation, is allowing that decision making very much at the front line and allowing them to work together. So I think it's about strong teams, strong leaders at all levels of the organisation, and really strong values that people buy into, that they talk about, that they they call out where we're not doing things right within those values or how we can improve them. So I think all those voices are really important.
There is an issue in the sector that comes up pretty much every other month, really, when we're talking to prospective kind of employers, is that there is sometimes the aspect of directorate silos. So people staying in their own lens, where they're potentially a technical expert, but not thinking broadly around what is the impact that their directorate is having on the broader organisation. You see that within property, you see that in other aspects of organisations as well. But in addition to that, Geeta, you've also got, as you say there, large dispersed teams, which also have their own probably cultural differences, given that they are in very different regions across the UK. So how are you making sure, just touching on some of the things that you said there, but how are you creating that culture of togetherness and making sure that those cultural silos in each region don't happen?
I think you have to accept there will be cultural differences across an organisation. So if I look at my care and support team, and I look at my development team, and I look at my property team, and I look at my finance, there are many cultures within the organisation because people do different things. So they operate in different ways. And I think anybody would be naive to think that you're not going to have different sort of subcultures within an organisation, because you're going to have different leaders, different styles, and that will happen. But I think fundamentally it's about what are the core things we want to achieve as an organisation, and how do those teams work together to achieve it. So if we're customer focused and we're saying it's about the customer, then it doesn't really matter what individuals think. It's about how do we pull together to make sure we get the right outcome for the customer. And it may be that those customer requirements are different in the Midlands to London or outside of London. So you've got to acknowledge there are going to be different requirements. You're going to need different skills within those teams, and you're going to need different levels of resources. Some areas it's easier to manage things than other areas. And you're doing that all the time, aren't you? You have building safety come up as a problem. Suddenly we've got to create a team to deal with this. They've then got to work with the property team and the customer services team. But the fundamental is, how do you remediate the building, and how do you make sure you keep the communication working with the customers? And if you have to move the customers, how do you move the customers? It may involve many different teams across the organisation, but they're all focused on that problem, and they were all focused on the customer. So I think let subcultures exist, that's fine, as long as everybody has the same values and they're driven by the same, they work together around the same projects. and they're very clear around what those outcomes should be. As long as you're clear around the outcomes, you can approach it in different ways.
We've noted that kind of during our conversation that M&A is prevalent in the sector at this moment due to various different reasons. But as an organisation that has grown to what it is today through M&A, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned around cultural change?
Well, I think cultural change takes time. So I think, everybody says within 1 year we're going to be this, in 2 years we're going to be, in 3 years we're going to be that. Well, it takes time to sort out the systems, and get everybody on the same systems. It takes time for people to stop saying, I am whatever the previous organisation is, and talk about the new. It just takes time. But I would say, deal with things quickly. Make sure, people know what they are doing in the organisation. And, if it's long and drawn out, then you're going to have more problems. So deal with things quickly. Make sure you've got those values really clearly laid out early on so people know what's happening. And then it's, what are the things that are going to be most impactful? And what we found actually was the pandemic. I'm sure lots of people say this, but it brought everybody together. It was almost like we were thinking about what are the big projects that we can use to bring people from across these organisations together so they're really focused on something new. And we were doing that. We had a new office where we put people from the different organisations into our new office. So they didn't say they belonged to that office, which was the old MHT or the old TVH. They were in one new office. And we were working on these projects, bringing people together because they wanted to get to know each other. They were going to work as one team. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. It was like the biggest, quickest way of bringing everybody together because everybody was completely focused on what repairs are we doing? How do we deal with our current support staff and support them? How do we, all of those really, really big, tough things that were happening. Nobody talked about previous organisations. Nobody talked about systems issues. Everybody focused really on our colleagues and customers in the most difficult areas. And I think it was a massive lesson really around, how do you get people to focus on the projects or rather than, the previous organisation. So it was a wonder for us. So I think anything which is big, exciting, that you can pull people, or big problem that you can pull people from across into, right, this is a new problem for the new organisation. How are we going to solve it?
And don't say that everything can be done in a year.
Yeah, I mean, that's that one organisation nobody talks about. MHT, that's rubbish. People were always, don't you talk about organisations you've worked in before? Oh, when I was that so and so, and even if they've changed their name, or you'll still think about the days when you were in that one small office when everybody knew everybody, and so it's natural. It's okay to do that as long as people feel part of the new organisation. It's okay that they remember being the old part of the old organisation as well.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And along with the busy day job, Geeta, you've also last year finished your tenure as the chair of the G15 in another challenging environment for both residents and organisations alike. I mean, you've obviously passed on the baton to Fiona now, but when you look back at that role, what are you most proud of?
I think there are a few things. I think raising the issue around diversity within G15 and what we are doing as organisations, and the pledge that we've made to improve diversity at the top of the organisation. And by doing that, there were a lot of other people that then started talking about it and started to, really focus on it. So I think that was really good. I think collaboration, the G15 is a very collaborative group of organisations now. I think years ago we were known just for development and competing for the biggest development programs. We're very collaborative. We share a lot of information. We work together. We want to find the best outcomes. So I think that more collaborative approach around, whether it's sort of property investment, whether it's around our community activities, what we can do around homelessness. All of those things are sort of much more collaboration as a group. And I think the other thing is, even though there were really tough things, and there still are tough things going on, there was the whole area around rent settlement, endless consultations around things coming, consultation number 13 that we've got, consultation 14, it's like constant. It's around actually what going to officials within a Department of Levelling Up and Communities and say, let us just model this for you. Let us show you what the outcome of some of these things will be. And I think, therefore forming relationships with the officials around, giving them an honest view of what the actual impact's going to be. We're not going to be able to change all government policy or legislation, but we can really talk to them about what the impact would be, and give them the financial impact. We can model things. We can show them what it is. We can bring them into our organisations and show what we're doing. And I think it was that sort of relationship building as well, to show that we're the kind of group you can come to and talk to, and we'll give you sort of honest feedback around the impact these things are going to have.
Brilliant, thank you. And it's fair to say you were pretty busy then.
It was busy. It was busy. The Magic Floyd is busy too now. I can just safely say.
Safely say you've passed on the busy baton, so it's, which is great. And as we move, final question, Geeta. I mean, as we move forward to the future, there's obviously an uncertain future for government. But what more can we, when we look at ourselves as a sector, what more can we do as a sector to continue to move forward in this challenging environment?
I think it's, creating partnerships, and showing what can be done through the power of those partnerships, and show the impact as well. So come up with different ideas in terms of solutions and show how they can be implemented. So if someone says, well, we want to build more social rent, but we've got no more money, which is something I hear all the time, well, you can show people what can be done through tax, through, other ways of not providing grant and delivery. Or you can be realistic and say, well, this is what will happen then in terms of delivery, and this is what will happen with impact. But there are other ways. There are income, there are tax, there are revenue. There are things that can be done, but if it's not directly to do with grant, but there is no way of producing more social rent unless you have some kind of subsidy or differential in terms of tax or something that comes away. So I think it is really about being honest, forming those partnerships with other organisations who, are part of the solution. We need everybody at the moment, local authorities, developers, contractors, for-profit RPs, housing association, to be part of this space in order to build more homes. We need everybody. So whoever your partners are, if you can share skills, resources, if you can share ideas, land, take shared risk, whatever it is, then you can do that without government intervention. But I think the most powerful thing is to keep coming up with what can be done and how it can be done, and showing people the way through. Because often that's what, that is what people want. They do want ideas around what else can we do. And often those ideas, they've been in the cupboard many years. You can just take them out again. We did it before. You could buy existing properties to solve temporary accommodation by buying, existing properties, particularly when the market's not so great. We're doing that now. I mean, there's no problem that hasn't happened before, no solution that you can't regurgitate and give a different name to and put it out the cupboard as well. So I'm a big believer of learning from what you've previously done as well.
Thank you, Geeta. But before we go, should I say, I've got some quick fire questions that we ask all of our guests at the end of each episode. What has been the most valuable leadership lesson you've learned?
I think surround yourself with people who've got diverse thoughts to your own, whether that's your board, your team, or whatever, but people who think differently to you.
Fantastic. And what advice would you give to an aspiring leader starting out on their journey?
I think, what do they want to be known for, and what values do they have? And be true to those values. So as they go through their career, make sure, because that's how they'll be seen as authentic.
Brilliant. And what do you believe to be the key leadership qualities required in today's world?
Agility, because you never know what's going to happen. Decisiveness, you can make the wrong decision, but don't faff around not make a decision. And I think emotional intelligence, understanding what's going on in your organisation, how people are feeling, what the mood is, what you need to dial up or dial down as you go through sort of difficult times.
Brilliant. And one leadership book you'd recommend to the listeners?
Well, I'd actually go for a podcast, which is Steve Bartlett's Diary of a CEO. It's a great podcast, and it's broad. It's not just about, systems thinking or something. It's about you're looking after yourself as well, and different speakers who talk about really interesting things around stress and resilience and all of that. So I would do that.
Brilliant. Geeta, thank you ever so much for joining us on the Housing Collective podcast, and I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Todd.